What up YouTube, it's Misery Hates Company. In this video, we are going to cover Captain America because he's been long overdue for a video from me, but I wanted to be patient and wait till he got his buff nerf adjustments, and they finally happened, and now I have finally the best build for Captain America. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. Now I'm actually really excited to bring you guys this video because Captain America has always been kind of meh, but after the rework that he received and really the buff, he's actually a lot of fun to A, play, and B, he's super viable. So I would highly recommend at least trying him out, but make sure you watch this video to the very end because I'm going to give you guys truly the best build, but I'm also going to give you guys some slight adjustments I would recommend based off the different game types you could be playing with Captain America. So first, let's go and look at the gear. So I always give you guys 3 sets of gear: the Kraken gear, the best regional gear, and then I also give you guys, I guess, the best free-to-play gear. So for Captain America, the best special gear you can actually use for him of the 3 between Steampunk, Rise of the East, and Eyes of Osiris. Now keep in mind they did adjust these ever so slightly after the most recent update. It's actually going to be Steampunk. So it gives you the Shield Absorption class skill +7 and then the Spearhead skill +7. And this one in particular is huge because it's also one of those Shield Absorption class skills. So it's actually going to be giving like +14, which is crazy. Now you are going to note that you get defense instead of attack, which you get literally attack on everyone else except for Captain America. Defense is actually as good as attack, which we will explain later. But you basically get to double dip here because you want to build him like a tank, but then you can also use his tank abilities and his tank spec to make him a huge aggressor as well. So defense is actually huge. So Steampunk is easily the best when it comes to just the Kraken or just the special costume option. When it comes to the best regional, there's a few different choices, but if we're truly just going to make it super simple, the best one that I would currently recommend in the game's current state is actually Dark Domain. And the reason being is that Dark Domain gives you the defense, which is what you're looking for, but it also gives you attack. And then we are looking for the Shield Absorption class skill, which is great, but I really love this attack. So again, you don't get attack by default for any of his costumes in the 2 set, but now you're getting it at the 3 set. So you really get to kind of, again, double dip because you basically get attack ×2 as if you're, you know, Black Widow, because your defense will turn into attack, which again, we'll talk to and we'll speak to in the specializations. So Dark Domain is the one that I would currently recommend in the game's current state. Now, when it comes to the free-to-play option for gear, the one that I would actually recommend is, where are we at? US Agent. Now, again, you get defense, HP, so you get a more tanky option. And if you're going to be free to play, you're going to want to build him a little bit more tanky, so this makes sense. And then you are going to get that Spearhead skill +6, which is a great skill, and you do a ton of damage with it. So it definitely is going to help you out as a free to play option. So just for a second, I'm going to talk about the best cards and battle badges and just stats to look for, because he's slightly different than other characters. So when it comes to the badges, when it comes to the blues, you just want defense. Defense, you actually do want to get as many blue cores as you can. And the core you're going to want is the one that gives you more defense. For reds and greens, I would actually recommend crit rate and then crit damage. So I would do crit rate first for red and then go to attack as a secondary stat. And then for the green, just great crit damage. If you get your crit damage to a high enough spot, then I would recommend defense pierce. And then of course, if you get yellow, HP, flat HP is great. So same with your cards then. So when it comes to your mega cards, you're going to look for cards that give you attack. So again, I'm saying for your cores, I would prioritize crit rate over attack. But when it comes time for your cards, your mega cards, I would recommend attack over crit rate. That way you get a nice little bit of a balance. Then you go crit rate, crit damage, and then defense. So that way you're kind of balancing all your stats out. You don't want too much of any one stat for Captain America. You really want to kind of lift all of them. So that's why I'm going to help you guys prioritize them in different ways for different types of gear and or badges. Now, if we jump over to our specialization, his specializations were pretty garbage at first. I mean, they were great options, but now you have even better options. So there's 4 in particular that I think I would say are a no-brainer, but I've seen builds with different ones already. So I'm going to go to the main 4, and then I'm going to show you a few different alternatives that you can switch out depending on your playstyle, depending on your gear, and just depending on you as a player and how you feel like you want to build your Captain America. But the main 4 are going to be Combat Vanguard. This converts your defense into attack. So again, with the Dark Domain set, you're going to be double dipping because you get attack and you get defense, and then your defense turns into attack. This is also how you see in terms of like overall power. You do see Captain America's generally being a little bit higher power because they do get to double dip really with their defense, turning it into attack. Now, the next one I would recommend is not that one. The next one I would recommend is Combat Spot Weakness, increased damage dealt to bleeding targets. You're gonna have several abilities that are actually gonna do cause a bleed onto the target, and you're just gonna do more damage to them, which is great. This isn't particularly special when it comes to the 1v1 or Dimension Duel build that I'm gonna show you guys later on, so keep this in mind for that. But this is also one that you could substitute if you're not gonna be doing PvP and you're gonna be doing more PvE, and we'll talk about that again later for the skills. Next one I would recommend, this one would be, I would say, number 2. So the first one I would recommend, it would be this one, Vanguard. Number 2 is going to be Shield Charisma, and then which is decreased damage received. You just straight tank stat. So the more points you put in this, the less damage you take. Pretty straightforward. Now the next one I'm going to talk about, and this one I was actually like really hit or miss on, but after reading it several times and kind of looking into it more, it's really kind of amazing. So this one is actually called Battle Preparation. So applies 2.8% of defense as defense rate. Decreases damage received by a percent amount, currently at level 0, or I guess 1, 16.5% when successfully defending, max rate 20%. So you're going to decrease your damage received after you successfully defend against something with this first sentence, which applies the blank percent of defense as a defense rate. So basically, the more you stack your defense, you're going to get a chance to defend against an attack, and then you're going to receive less damage for doing nothing. It's not a skill. It's not I'm assuming it has some type of hitting cooldown that it doesn't mention. Which kind of stinks. I wish they would, if it does have a hitting cooldown, I wish they would call that out. If it doesn't have a hitting cooldown, that's pretty sick. So those are the 4 that I would recommend. Now, some other ones that I would actually, I think are a decent option, again, depending on your playstyle and depending on who you are, it would be this one first. So 5% chance to absorb additional 25% of vibration gauge upon using a shield absorption skill. So again, this is a regroup yellow tactics regroup, and you're basically going to get a higher percent chance to absorb more for your vibration gauge, which we'll talk about later. So, and you're going to be building this with this build. You're going to have shield absorption class skills active on your tree. So this is a good option for this build. So the last trait that I actually recommend as another option for you for this build would actually be this one, which is Passion, or it's a green, which is Tactics, and then Passion, which absorbs a percent of damage dealt to the enemy as HP. So you get more HP, making you more tanky for the damage you deal to the enemy. Making you all that much more tanky. I like the other options more than this, but this really is a good choice for anyone who needs a little bit more extra tankiness. Okay, so now if we go over to the skills, I have 2 different builds I'm going to show you guys. So the first one is more of like a standalone variety build, if you will, one that I would recommend for PvE or PvP, with the exception of Dimension Duel. So this one starts us off with this boyo, which is class shield absorption, again, which is what we were looking for. So this one is actually report for duty precise attack. So it does 712% damage, absorbs 25% of vibration gauge, and it decreases the defense by 33.43% for 5 seconds when the skill lands, which is why it's going to be your opener. You're going to jump in there, get your vibration gauge up a little bit, and decrease by basically a third, which is huge. Next up is that skill that we were talking about with the gear, which is Spearhead. So this is one of your biggest damage skills, and it's still a shield absorption class. So that's why you get to see that +5 from the Dark Domain gear that I have. Now, this one does still absorbs 25% of the vibration gauge. So at this point, you're up to 50% after this skill lands. So it charges towards the enemy while holding up his shield twice in a row to deal 1,261% damage and pushes back the enemy untargetable while using this skill. This was a new change for this skill. So when you use it, you used to only be targetable while you're actually dashing. So while you're using the whole skill, you are now untargetable, which is huge, especially for Captain America, because he didn't really have one prior to that. The next skill is going to be Captain's Leadership, Captain's Provocation. This actually provokes the enemies to attack you for 6 seconds. Now, this is also a little bit of a change. So in PvP, you cannot break this. You literally have to attack Captain America. Now, in Dimension Duels, like I said, it doesn't really matter, but this is why this is good for Omega War or PvE. If your friends are about to die for whatever reason in the raid, invasion, or a blitz, then you can basically taunt the boss to get aggro. Or in Omega War, you can actually have any of the surrounding people attack you, and you also take 57% less damage, which is awesome. So you're basically making everyone attack you, but they can't do that much damage to you, which is crazy. You're cutting their damage in half for 6 seconds. So at this point, you're at roughly 50% of your total absorbs engage. Now we're gonna go ahead and release it. So it deals 30% additional damage when using vibration gauge, which you will, because this will be basically, think of this as a rotation. That's how I think of it personally. So you can do 30% additional damage with this skill. Deals 30% additional guard damage when using vibration gauge, which again you will be doing. And you're going to be, so swings his shield and cracks a shockwave to deal 1,101% damage with consecutive attacks, then knocks down the attacked enemy. So this is called Unbreakable Will Subdue. So again, you built up all that vibration, and now you're going to unleash it with this skill. So the last skill is actually going to be Sentinel of Liberty. Indomitability is the name of the skill. So this is your second highest damage skill. So it spins at a high speed to deal 1,722% damage to nearby enemies and strike down on the ground to knock back the attacked enemies. Again, it's going to deal more damage as you release it. So for PvP, I would not use this as a true rotation. Instead, I would build it back up with one of your first two skills, your vibration gauge, and then either use this or this one, so your 4 or 5, to do single target or AoE damage depending on where you are in the fight. It does do a ton of damage. It does have a long cooldown. With this build, you will have a lot of downtime, if you will, where you're not actively using skills, which kind of stinks. But at the same time, if you get CDR from your badges or your cards, it can help a lot. So that's at least what I've noticed while I'm leveling him and playing with these a little bit in PvP, is that I do have a lot of downtime with this build. So the one change you could make with this build for this skill, and so instead of using Indomitability, you could use Line of Fire, which has a half the cooldown cost, a little bit less required stamina. It does do less damage, almost half, but it does add a bleed to the target, which is very nice. So again, we talked about the bleed and the specializations. None of our skills as of yet, I believe, had applied a bleed at all. So keep that in mind. So if you're using this one, you don't want to use that spec that had the bleed. You want to substitute that green one for one of the other ones that I mentioned. Now, but with this though, if you do make the switch, you do add the bleed, so you could do that. But the reason I would actually switch to this one is if you're in a blitz where you need to clear a bunch of trash or trash mobs, which is just like the non-boss mobs in a dungeon or blitz, this is great for that because it has half the cooldown time, still does a ton of damage, and it decreases HP recovery, which is kind of meh. But and really, you're using it for the bleed and for the lower cooldown. Overall, I would stick to the Indomitability because it does do a ton of damage. Now, that's the first build. It's kind of just a good general build. Now, if you want Dimension Duel build, PvP Dimension Duel, obviously, I would switch to these skills. So the first one is actually going to be reporting for duty, shield slice. So this is you basically throw your shield at them, decrease HP recovery by 50% for 7 seconds, which honestly is a pretty nice debuff to apply in the beginning of a Dimension Duel. You also absorb 25% of the vibration gauge, guard break is medium. You do 571% damage as bleed damage. So you do apply the bleed, and then you could do more damage to that individual or target with that spec that does do more bleed damage. So keep that in mind. It has a very, very, very low cooldown and its base value at literally less than 10 seconds, which is great. The next one we're going to talk about is Unbreakable Will Neutralization, which bashes his shield to deal 363% damage with the shockwave. The attacked enemy is silenced and all of their buffs are removed. So this is one of the ones that was adjusted with the buff. So now you actually silence the enemy for 2 seconds. They cannot use skills, which is pretty crazy. And then you also remove all their buffs. So that's pretty freaking awesome. It also has a very low cooldown at only 11 seconds. So it deals 30% of the damage. Again, you're releasing your gauge on this one. So you build it up just a hair here, and then you would use that one. The next skill is it's the same one as the other one, which is the Captain's Leadership, Captain's Provocation, which just, again, provokes everyone to attack you, and you take less damage. Again, you're doing literally less than half of the damage they would typically be doing to you, which is great. So the next skill is actually going to be Spearhead Forefront again, same as on the last build. You're just pushing them around and you are untargetable while you use this. So you silence them, you take less damage, and now you become untargetable. So last but not least, you're actually going to use Indomitability just like the last build, and this is where you just spin to win and do a ton of damage. Almost 200k damage, which is crazy. 200k% damage, which is just wildly amazing. But so with this, you are a huge tank. You still do tons and tons of damage, and you're silencing people, you're taking away their buffs, and you're applying a bleed, which means you do more damage to them. So all in all, Captain America is just this massive tank now that can just not take damage, but then deal a ton of it. So that's actually going to do it for our Captain America build. I hope this was helpful. I know a lot of you have been asking for a build for Captain America, but like I said in the beginning, I wanted to wait until they made the adjustments because I felt like it would have been a really just waste of time to make a video and then have them come out and change all of his stats or stats and specializations and skills, which they kind of did. They really reworked him, and he's just way more enjoyable to use. He's not as clunky as he was the first time. So now it's like we're really getting the true Captain America experience. If this video helped you, consider smashing the like button. It helps me out a great deal. It gets this video pushed out to more people so that we can help more people, which is why we're doing this. And if you want to see more videos like this, smash the sub button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my videos. Now, I'm going to leave you guys with this last video, which I'm going to recommend, which is the truly just best game-breaking companions that are in the game right now. They added 2, and one of them is just earth-shattering and destroying people in PvP. Check out this video right now to see who I'm talking about and the best companion is in the game.